I had always believed in quiet strength. To the outside world, I was the perfect wife, gentle, attentive, graceful. I smiled when he entered the room, laughed at his jokes, and nodded at his opinions. People often said I was reserved, but loyal, and my husband well. He believed he knew me entirely. He believed he could say anything, behind closed doors or over dinner with friends, without consequence. That evening, the dining room was warm with candlelight, the soft clink of silverware punctuating polite conversation. The scent of roasted lamb mingled with rosemary and garlic, and the fire crackled softly in the hearth. I had spent hours preparing this meal, hoping for an evening that would feel ordinary, peaceful, like so many we had shared in the early days of our marriage. But as soon as he began speaking, I realized ordinary was gone. He leaned back in his chair, glass of red wine in hand, and smirked. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder how she even got through university," he said, his words dripping with casual cruelty. "She's sweet, sure, but clever, not really." I froze. The words themselves were sharp, but it wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it, assuming I would never understand. Assuming I couldn't. He continued, laughing lightly, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "I mean, she's cute, but if we're being honest, I do all the thinking in this house. I handle the important matters, she just follows along." A polite chuckle rose from the guests, oblivious to the venom in his tone. I smiled faintly, masking the tightening in my chest, the burning heat of betrayal. They didn't know, he didn't know, but I did, because I understood every word, every insult, every belittlement, every condescending laugh. My Japanese studies had been a private refuge, a secret world of literature and poetry, a skill he never suspected I possessed. And tonight, it had transformed into something else entirely, a weapon. I set my fork down carefully, heart pounding, mind racing. My fingers itched to respond, to confront, to let the truth crash over him in a tide of shame. But no, not yet. Patience, I reminded myself. Sweet revenge was not hurried. It was meticulous, deliberate. I forced a light laugh at a guest's joke, nodded when he spoke, and let him continue, unaware of the storm simmering beneath my calm exterior. My smile was genuine enough to seem ordinary, but my mind was anything but. I replayed his words silently, translating each one again in my head, savoring the sting of his arrogance. The meal went on, each course a lesson in restraint. I allowed him to believe he was untouchable, that I remained the docile, unassuming wife he thought he had molded. Little did he know that I had changed the rules of the game without saying a word. By dessert, my resolve was solid. I would not let this betrayal pass unremarked, not in my mind and certainly not in action. But for now, I would remain silent, the quiet woman he underestimated, the one he had believed harmless. Because the truth, when it came, would not just hurt him, it would astonish him, and it would be beautiful. After that dinner, the house seemed impossibly quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the wall clock, even the soft sigh of the wind outside felt deafening. Every word my husband had spoken replayed in my mind, sharp and unrelenting, like needles pressed against my skin. I felt the sting of humiliation, but beneath it, a strange calm began to grow. I poured myself a glass of tea, the steam curling in gentle spirals above the cup. I sat by the window, gazing at the dog garden, the moonlight shimmering across the frost-tipped grass, and I thought about every instance he had dismissed me, laughed at me, undermined my opinions with a casual arrogance that masked itself as charm. I had been patient, too patient, perhaps. I had smiled while he belittled me to friends, nodded while he took credit for my ideas at work, and endured his whispers about my supposed inadequacies. But now, something inside me shifted. I realized he had underestimated not only my intelligence, but my resolve. I had a secret, one he would never suspect. My fluency in Japanese had always been a private treasure, a skill I honed quietly, savoring the subtleties of language, the nuances of expression. And now it could become something else, a shield, a scalpel, a sword. I began to plan carefully, thinking through every step. There would be no rash actions, no loud confrontations that would make me lose control. Sweet revenge was not anger. It was precision. It was the thrill of knowing he would never see it coming, of watching him unravel without me raising my voice. I reviewed the small details I had noticed over the years. The way he boasted to friends, the petty lies he told colleagues, the secrets he believed were safe. There were patterns, small openings I could exploit. And with my knowledge of Japanese, I could infiltrate spaces he thought were private. Every whispered insult, every careless remark he made in front of people he considered his audience, could be turned against him in a way that would leave him reeling. But first I had to cultivate patience. I had to perfect my composure, maintain the illusion of the obedient, harmless wife he believed I was. I would not allow him a single hint of suspicion. His arrogance had blinded him. It would be his undoing. In the quiet of the night, I rehearsed my strategies silently. I imagined conversations, imagined revealing truths in ways that would sting without being overtly cruel. I considered how I could use subtlety to my advantage, messages left where he would discover them, insights whispered in the right ears, evidence presented with the casual innocence of someone who had been overlooked. A smile tugged at the corners of my lips. It was not a smile of joy nor of malice. It was the smile of someone who had discovered her own power and was savoring the promise of justice. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had not broken me. It had awakened something far more dangerous: clarity, focus, and an understanding that some lessons are best taught quietly, with elegance, and without a single word wasted. Tomorrow, the ordinary would resume. I would serve him tea with a smile, ask about his day with warmth, and nod at his jokes with practiced politeness. But behind that serene exterior, I would be plotting, weaving the threads of a plan that he would never see coming. For now the house was still, and in that stillness I allowed myself to savor the truth. I was no longer the underestimated wife. I was something far more formidable, and when the moment came, the reckoning would be sweet. The day finally arrived when patience turned into action. I moved through the house with the same calm composure I had always worn, my exterior flawless, my demeanor perfectly ordinary. My husband, of course, remained oblivious, basking in the security of his perceived superiority. He did not suspect that every careless word, every laugh at my expense, had been catalogued, remembered, and quietly weaponized. It began subtly. I answered his questions with politeness, yet each response carried a carefully hidden weight, a nuance only I understood. I smiled at his boasts to colleagues over the phone, nodding in agreement while my mind mapped the paths I would take to dismantle his illusions. I watched him, noticing the little habits, the cracks in his armor that had always been there but never mattered, until now. The first step of my plan involved a series of conversations I had in Japanese, seemingly innocuous, with people he would never expect. I shared information he had assumed was private, framing it as casual, offhand commentary, allowing others to witness the truth of his arrogance without directly implicating me. His friends began to exchange glances, subtle but sharp, noticing discrepancies they had previously overlooked. The thrill was intoxicating. I remained outwardly serene, serving him coffee with a smile, asking about his day with gentle interest, all while a silent storm brewed beneath my calm. Every time he muttered a dismissive comment, I translated it silently in my mind, noting the sting, storing it for the moment it would matter most. Then came the moment of confrontation, though he did not recognize it as such. At a small gathering of friends, he began his familiar pattern of boasting, speaking in casual tones about my supposed limitations, certain I could not understand. My lips curved into the faintest of smiles as I leaned forward, pretending to adjust a napkin, and I spoke. Not in accusation, not in anger, but in flawless Japanese, each word precise, deliberate. My voice was calm, even gentle, but the meaning was unmistakable. I repeated verbatim everything he had said about me in the past, the insults, the belittlement, the careless judgments he assumed were secret. I told it to the very people he had been trying to impress, people who suddenly looked at him with a mixture of shock and incredulity. He froze, his confident smile faltered, a stutter in his words betrayed the panic he could no longer hide. I continued, my tone soft but unwavering, ensuring each statement landed exactly as intended. The room went quiet, save for the faint crackle of the fireplace. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow, a bittersweet taste, knowing that the man I once loved had underestimated me so completely. His face paled, his charm evaporating under the weight of his own words, now reflected back with precision. And yet I remained calm. I did not raise my voice, I did not shout, I did not cry. I simply let the truth speak, carried in the cadence of a language he had never thought I would use against him. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted. He understood in a way he could not deny that I was no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer underestimated. The quiet, calculating wife he had dismissed was finally revealed, and she was formidable, precise, and unstoppable. That evening, I learned something profound. Revenge was not merely the act of hurting someone. It was the art of demonstrating your strength while they faltered, the satisfaction of reclaiming dignity with elegance and control. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. The days following that evening were quiet, almost serene, yet charged with an invisible tension. My husband moved through the house with the careful hesitance of a man unsure of his footing, as though the very walls whispered reminders of his missteps. He avoided eye contact, his confident tone reduced to a hesitant murmur, and every glance he cast my way carried an unspoken acknowledgement. He had been seen, understood, and exposed. I maintained my composure, graceful and calm, allowing the ordinary rhythm of our lives to continue. I smiled when he spoke, asked politely about his day, and served meals with the same delicate care as always. To the outside world, nothing had changed. He still believed the home remained his stage, his domain, unaware that every small action, every word he uttered, was now viewed through the lens of a truth he could not undo. The satisfaction of revenge is not in chaos, I realized, but in quiet precision. I had taken control, not through confrontation, but by allowing the consequences of his own arrogance to unfold naturally. Friends and colleagues, who had previously laughed at his claims about me, now observed him with cautious scrutiny, catching the subtleties he had ignored. The truths he had assumed were buried, and he could do nothing to stop it. I felt no glee in watching him falter, only a calm sense of justice, a reassurance that the world could be righted without malice or cruelty. There was beauty in this balance, a poetry in reclaiming dignity with grace, in demonstrating strength without losing it to anger. My actions had spoken louder than any outburst could, and they had reshaped the boundaries of our relationship. He tried, of course. There were attempts at charm, small gestures of apology, a half-hearted effort to regain the dominance he had once assumed was unquestioned. But I no longer felt the need to forgive or to soothe. My heart was steady, my mind clear. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly, and I had no desire to allow him the satisfaction of reclaiming it. In the quiet moments, I reflected on what had changed within me. The betrayal I had endured had carved out space for strength I had never fully acknowledged, a resilience sharpened by patience, observation, and the knowledge that one's own intelligence can be a secret weapon. I had learned that liberation is not granted by others. It is claimed, cultivated, and wielded with care. And so, I began to plan for myself, for the life I wanted beyond the constraints of a home overshadowed by arrogance. I nurtured old passions, revisited abandoned dreams, and allowed myself the freedom to imagine a future defined not by his judgments, but by my own choices. Each step was deliberate, each decision a reaffirmation that I existed independently, fully, without need of his approval. Occasionally, I caught him watching me from across the room, a flicker of regret or fear or perhaps realization crossing his features. I returned his gaze with a quiet smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the power he had lost. No words were necessary, the balance had shifted, and the lesson had been delivered. In the end, the house felt lighter, the air clearer. I had faced betrayal, endured its sting, and emerged with grace and clarity. Sweet revenge had been more than an act. It had been a revelation, and in its aftermath, I discovered something far more precious than satisfaction: freedom. I was no longer the underestimated wife, the silent observer, the patient victim. I was whole, empowered, and finally, completely untouchable.